Hello, welcome to Contino's presentation on using a service canvas to define SLOs. My name is Andy Snyder, and I'm joined by my colleague Gregory Patmore, and we're both consultants at Contino. Contino is a transformation consultancy that works with highly regulated industries to help them transform their organizations and adapt modern day best practices. One of the ways we transform organizations is by helping them to define good service level objectives. And in this virtual world, we needed to come up with a way to facilitate group meetings with our clients so that we'd be able to have effective collaboration with them in ways that were easy to see all the work that we had done at a quick glance, and also something that we could do virtually over Zoom or Teams. So we came up with the service canvas that really is working well for us using Miro or any diagramming tool that you have at your disposal. Let's take a look at the service canvas. Mr. Patmore?
Sure. Thanks, Andy. As he said, my name is Gregory Patmore, and this is our service canvas at a glance. You can see it's pretty simple. Over here on the left, we have an example of the formal document you'll create at the end. In the middle here, we have an example service to refer to as you're working through this process with your team. And then over here, we have the blank canvas where you'll actually create your SLOs. If we zoom in a little bit, we can see that this is basically just the Google example document taken from online. And we've turned that document into this canvas here as an example. The Google web game, everybody's probably very familiar with this at this point if you've done anything in regards to SLOs. But we wanted a service that defined a few components, had differences in customers for each component, and had some good target categories to work with. And so let's just go through these categories, from top to bottom, just to explain to you what they are and what we use them for. Obviously, at the top, we're just defining the service, usually just a name. And then we define the components that are a part of that service. In this case, we have 3 components. And then underneath, we define the customers of each one of those components, which is really important while you're in process defining these SLOs. But in the end, it doesn't really make it into the formalized SLO document. It's just there for reference. Underneath there, we have target categories that we are suggesting is what the user of that service is actually interested in. And over here, just to run over here, we have a few examples that we can pull from as we're working out this chart, just to say, we need latency. And we can really go through these target categories examples and challenge the service to say, hey, are you sure your user doesn't care how long it takes to service their request? Usually they do. And it's a great tool to just help us jar and challenge things as we're going through this with folks. So once we have the target categories, what we're after next is defining a single good event. What means success? In this case, for availability of an API, we're going to say success is any HTTP response that isn't in the 500 range. Once we've defined that, now we can take that and turn it into a formula that measures all of the events, which is otherwise known as a service level indicator, or SLI. And then once we have that, we can establish a threshold that will defend, saying 97% success rate on availability means generally our users are happy. And that's basically it. We've done this through a whole bunch of teams. It's worked really well for us. And now I'll hand it back to Andy to finish off the presentation end of this.
Thank you so much, Gregory. So as you're going through this process with the team, we recommend that you keep these tips in mind. Use red stickies to annotate important points for follow-up so that you don't get burdened down with things that need to be researched. Remind the team that it doesn't need to be perfect on the first draft, right? That they can get something realistic out there And then we'll work with them to refine this as we get to know more about the service and the customer's expectations of the service. For brownfield services, or those that already exist, the best thing to do is to document current service levels, look for existing metrics to get very realistic numbers out there. And then use the squawk test, meaning that if nobody's complaining, then it's most likely an acceptable level of service. However, if there are complaints, then a more aggressive target is going to need to be sought out. Lastly, don't be shy about using canvases from other teams as examples. It all feeds in and can be helpful in the process overall. In the first session, you have just a few goals. You're going to want to identify the services that the team provides, which components of those services are being accessed or touched by internal customers, consumers of those services, who those customers are for each component, and lastly, the target categories. What is important? What are the qualifiers that the customers need to have for those services? Once you have all of the components, customers, and target categories defined, the next stage of using the services canvas is to start on the left and then go component by component, category by target category until you have everything filled in. In our experience, at a minimum, each of these components should have at least 2 target categories: latency and availability. You can usually get this done in about 3 to 6 one-hour working sessions with your teams. They can run a little longer or shorter based on the complexity level of the service and how familiar they are with the ins and outs of the services. But you should also understand that the team will likely need to research some of these points, and that's fine. The first iteration is never going to be perfect, but you do want to give it the best shot with the most accurate numbers that you have available at that time. After you finish filling out the service canvas completely, you're going to want to run a gap analysis to see what you have available and what you don't. You're going to also need to create a backlog of work in order to actually implement these SLOs. Don't forget, also, you're going to need to capture the work necessary to set up dashboards that are going to show these SLOs in a single pane. And you're going to also distill the information from the canvas into a formal SLO definition document. Lastly, make sure that you define an error budget policy so that the team is aware what actions they are going to take once they're not in compliance with their service level objectives. Good SLO documents should be publicly available. So on SharePoint or Confluence, whatever wiki platform your client uses, they need to be updated frequently as features are added or the scope of the service changes. A feedback loop to change management would be very helpful. And lastly, you want to follow a consistent format for everyone's SLOs. Thank you so much for listening. On behalf of Greg and myself, we hope you found this to be helpful, and we look forward to hearing how this process worked for you. Thanks for your time.